Hello everybody, I'm working today on creating a video for you that will help you in your quest to install Microsoft Visual Studio on your machine so you can complete the work for the ASP.NET classes here at Gateway. Both the first class and the second class, ASP.NET 2, require this piece of software. I do have information embedded into our core shells, and the reason I'm recording this video is because, of course, with technology things change over time, so we have to figure out the new ways to install the software. So the instructions that I have here will be updated once I actually figure them out. What I'm doing right now is I'm actually going to this little section here in Unit 1, which tells you to download and install Visual Studio 2017. What we discovered in class last week was that getting directly to that product on the Microsoft website is a little bit tricky. It's not impossible, but it takes a little bit of navigating before you can get there to find that specific version. If you are really hell-bent on matching up all the stuff that I'm doing in the videos, and that would be the videos that are marked like this, recorded in the spring using Visual Studio 2017, then you'll want to get that version because it'll be absolutely identical. If you're okay with going to the new version, which I'm going to opt to do today, then you can just try to follow along with me here. The basic approach is just to go to visualstudio.com and then download on the first link here. Now please note that there's a difference between the Visual Studio IDE, which is the full product that creates compiled code, rich environment, internal web server, and just about every Microsoft tool you could ever think of, and a gazillion different frameworks for many different languages. That's really the big powerful tool that we're using here, and we're not only learning how to code, but we're learning how to use the tool as well. Some of you may already be using Visual Studio Code, which is the lightweight multi-platform version of this, so it runs on Mac, PC, and Linux, and it's more of a lightweight text editor in that it's not really designed to compile code internally. Usually you have to get plugins to do it, and that's possible with that product, but it does not have all the features that the full-blown Visual Studio does. It is a great editor for doing simple web things. Now, in terms of what versions you'll choose to install, you'll notice there's 3 different versions here. I'm going to be recommending that you install the community version, very simply because it's almost identical to the professional version and it never expires. So even if you stop being a student here, you still have access to it. And I think Microsoft plans to keep it that way over time, so let's hope that's the case. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click the link here, and what I'm hoping to do is get the installer. There it comes, and then I'm just simply going to click on it here to activate it. Alright, and I'm not so concerned about the stuff in the background here, and I'm going to go ahead and go through this process. Now, I already have done this process a couple of times, so yours might not go as instantly as mine just did, but I was running into some hiccups because I uninstalled Visual Studio 2017 on my system and then tried directly installing it, and what it did is it kept throwing an error message, and the way that I got past that was very simply to reboot my machine and then run the installer again. Alright, so what we need to do now is to make sure that we get all the tools installed that we need for this class, and hypothetically you could look to add tools that you think you might need for other classes, or if you're just willing to experiment. The catch is that every time you make a selection here off of this list, and you can see there's a bunch of different things you can do, you're going to add to the size of the install. Right now, without adding any frameworks or languages, it's still half a gig in size. You can see the total right here. Now I'm going to go through and show you which tools that you must install and which ones you might want to additionally install. So I have a little list here in our core shell that shows you which tools I believe you absolutely need, and a couple that you might want to add just because of other classes you might be taking. I do recommend that for this class that you make sure that you add all of the ones listed here, and I'll show you where to find them inside the tool. But I'm going to be kind of strategic, and what I'm going to do, if I can get Blackboard to cooperate here, is kind of move that list off to the side and then have the installer sitting in front of it so we can kind of see both, and you can see the correlation. All right, so we do want to do the ASP.NET and web development. That's what this class is all about, after all. And then you can see as I added that, the amount of space that all of a sudden it requires. Right? And then every time you add a different, template or type of language structure, it will add a series of additional tools that you can add optionally. And notice some of the options here. One option that some people will sometimes opt is different templates that came from previous versions. I'm going to ask you actually to not select that one, and the reason for that is I want you to get used to the new workflow. Microsoft has eliminated old templates because frankly they're outdated, and they want you to move forward. So I see no reason why we shouldn't comply with that, basically. So let's leave that one alone. All right, so we will need the Azure tools. Now this is, frankly, this is optional, but I think it's a good one to throw in there. Some of you might be in our program learning how to code Python, and if you just want to play with it in this environment, I would go ahead and install it. Also, if you take our Web Programming 2 class, you'll at some point need to work with Node.js, and maybe you already have Visual Studio installed because of working in that class. So I think that's a no-brainer. And then we do want to throw in the desktop development tools, because this allows us to build native Windows applications if we so choose. Now, if you were in the software program and did Introduction to Programming and Database Concepts, that's an absolute must. And frankly, I don't see why you wouldn't want to have that in there. I'm going to not install the C++ tools, and I'm going to show you why, because as soon as I add those, I want you to check the gigabyte count here, how much it jumps. Maybe later I'll throw that in, but not now. I will throw in Universal Windows Platform Development, and you can see that jumped it up quite a bit. If you plan on taking our mobile class later, here's another option that you might want to install. But remember, every time you add one of these, it takes a significant amount of additional storage on your machine. And frankly, some of you might not be able to handle that on your machines. I'm opening up my File Explorer window now, popped up on my second screen, and I'm just clicking on my computer here just to see how much disk space I have available. Now, I happen to have 2 hard drives here, so I have plenty of room to throw this product in there. But I want you to notice, really, this is a pretty small hard drive, 250 gigs. It is an SSD, but 85 gig free is not a lot. I'm making a commitment now to already install, what does it say, 22 gigs, and I'm not even done making selections yet. My remembrance is, I think if you click everything in here and add all the updates and plugins and everything, you can get close to 100 gigs in disk space. So please make sure that you have that available, and then more importantly, whatever the size of your drive is, I would always recommend that you reserve at least 10% of the drive to be free so that your machine operates properly. Otherwise, sometimes you run into the risk of it crashing and freezing simply because there's not enough disk space. So these are considerations I think that are pretty important. All right, let's get this window out of the way here. So it looks like I got enough disk space, and I should, because I just had Visual Studio on here. And then I'm going to look at a couple of other plugins here that I think are going to be important, at least for the work that I'm doing. Data storage and processing tool sets are very important, because we will be working with connecting to databases later, both in the ASP.NET 1 and 2 core, so that's important. If you are perhaps in the data analytic degree or just curious about that, you can always add the libraries for that. And I'm going to watch my gigabyte total here as I click these options, because if this takes a huge jump in size, then I might shy away from it. The other one that I'm going to throw in here is Office and SharePoint development. We do use some of these templates in the .NET classes, and chances are you'll probably also use them in Web Programming 2. Of course, if you take any of the SharePoint certificate courses, you might be asked to work with those as well. Another one that you might want to play with a little bit is this new library they've added here called the .NET Core, and you see from its title that it is a cross-platform development library which is designed to allow you to use Visual Studio not only on a PC and create code, but also do it on other platforms, so Linux and Mac as well. So that's kind of a little hidden secret, is Macintoshes now can install Visual Studio, but they're pretty limited in terms of which libraries they can use. I think it's mostly limited to the C libraries and this .NET Core cross-platform piece. And I think you're going to see this grow significantly, but unfortunately none of our books and materials focus on it. I know there's books starting to come out on it, and maybe in the near future we'll be switching over to teaching that, because it is kind of nice to go cross-platform. But what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to add it in just to see, once again, not a lot of space is being taken up. If you just want to play with some of these other things, feel free, but like I said, everything you add takes space, and the space can be significant when you start choosing all the options. I think I'm good with 22.5 gig. That'll work for me. So I'm going to go ahead and click install. Now I want you to notice the little button next to it. This is kind of cool. It says install while downloading. Now in the past, older versions, and I think you have to actually go back like 4 or 5 versions, this is kind of default actually. It's downloading a piece while it's installing others, so it's more efficient use of your time. So instead of it taking maybe a few hours, might be whittled down to an hour, just because both actions are happening simultaneously. But you should always check the options. That's kind of the way I look at it. So if you're in a situation where you want to download it all first and then do the install, like maybe run the install overnight, feel free. I'm sitting at my desk in my office, so I'm going to say heck with it. I'm just going to hit choose install while downloading and install, and then we'll let the process get started. So this will take some time, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pause this video, let Visual Studio go ahead and do its work, and then I'll come back when everything is done, just so that you can see everything is installed correctly. I'm just doing a real quick update here. We're about 5 minutes into the install, maybe not even. I just want to show you how fast it's going. Now granted, I am on the campus network, and the download speeds here are pretty significant. I'm getting well over 100 megabit here. And the installation after 5 minutes is up to 18%. So it shouldn't take you too long, is kind of my thinking, especially if you're on a high-speed connection. I think that's probably the biggest time consumer. So I'll be back in just in a few minutes, or a few seconds for you, once this is all done. Alright, I'm starting up the video again because I just looked over at my screen and noticed that download's 100%, and it says finishing up 100%. Notice the little box up here is checked that says start after installation, so I'm assuming it's about to fire up Visual Studio here any second. What I think is fascinating is I'm looking at my clock here. I think I started at 3:53, so it looks like about 20 minutes to do this whole process. Now it looks like there might be a couple things to do after a restart, but if I won't be able to continue this video through a restart, but that's basically the process. I'll have subsequent videos introducing you on how to use Visual Studio, but that looks like the install process. I do recommend that once you have it installed, that you add a shortcut on your taskbar or your start menu so it's easier to launch. And that's basically it, folks. It's not really that hard to do. Just make sure you have a computer that can run it. Usually I recommend an i5 or better. 8 gigs of RAM is usually a good idea, or more, and if you can afford it to, SSDs, within a couple of years I'm sure those will be standard too. So you'll probably listen to this then and laugh and go, what do you mean SSD is a recommendation? It is a really good thing, because it does help your system operate so much faster. Alright folks, that ends the video here, and I'll see you in the next one.